Hello, good evening. You are welcome to the International Institute of Anthropological Applications, a virtual institute of Anthropological Association for Humankind. Through this institute, one course, Ambedkar and the agenda for nation building is designed and offered by Professor P.D.Satyapal Kumar sir from the Andhra University, from the Department of Anthropology. So now we have him here. So I request him to deliver the lecture.
Yeah, good evening, friends. Welcome once again for this 13th lecture on the course Ambedkar and nation building. We have dealt with the different facets of Ambedkar's agenda for nation building in the last 12 different topics that we discussed, and now this is the penultimate kind of a topic that we are dealing with. And this topic, like in the sense, we have kept it as a very important topic, which has been like a kind of an engine for the whole Ambedkar's agenda. So we titled it as Desideratum of Annihilation of Caste. So the title why we kept is because Ambedkar himself felt that annihilation of caste is very, very essential, and it is a prerequisite for establishing a kind of a a democratic society in this country, and to make it a kind of a modern nation. So that is the reason why we look into that kind of feasibility and Ambedkar's program as to what he really wanted to uh, realize if the caste has been an operating principle, and by destroying it, so what he would like to see a future for India as a nation. Friends, we understand that caste has been a unique social institution in Indian society, which like in a sense has been a structural kind of feature. It regulates all facets of life: the marriage, kinship, economy, political relationships, religious, in fact, no, the foundation of the society, and it informs all kind of regulations in the society. And as you look into the kind of the role of caste in Indian society, we find that this is highly, like in a sense, integrated into all walks of life. Then when Ambedkar says that you will have to get rid of this institution of caste, the system of caste, we get two kinds of like in a sense doubts. One is that can we destroy a system, a social system, which has been so powerful, so integral to a society like India? One, is it feasible? Two, in that case, like in a sense, for whatever reasons, like in the of any importance that Ambedkar talks about, call for destruction of a social system or an institution. By saying so, can we regard Ambedkar as an anthropologist? Because our kind of a standpoint is that Ambedkar and his analysis, incisive analysis, and then wonderful, like in a sense, exposition on Indian society, trying to find out the kind of mechanisms which other social scientists could not look into. We understand very importantly that this is a kind of an advantage that Ambedkar had in his training in anthropology. So if a person as a social scientist would want to destroy a social institution, would that augur well with an anthropologist? So that's another question that we need to look into. But what I would like to mean is that of late, many anthropologists, especially in fact now from the mid to late 1990s, they have like in a sense. Dr. Gudavarti, kindly mute yourself, please.
Sir, yeah. Okay, please go ahead.
So we find several anthropologists, especially since late 1990s, they have been vehement, in fact, now in taking up a position of an activist. Otherwise, we know anthropologists, in fact, know the very, say, like in a sense, like in a sense, whenever the concept of cultural relativism has been introduced by French Boyes, so anthropologists have been relativists. They have taken a position that, in fact, no, like they would not judge any society or any institution or any kind of a morality from the standpoint of view of the anthropologist per se, and they would try to understand those institutions, those values, those moralities from the perspective of the members of the society. So this particular very what do you call important and integral approach called as relativism has been the mainstay in anthropology, and anthropologists, in fact, always try to be neutral. But when we try to talk about an anthropologist, or we want to, like in a sense, portray Ambedkar as an anthropologist, very serious and quite applied anthropologist, and this person, in fact, as giving a call to destroy a system, a social system. He was asking for a very strong word, annihilation. It is, in fact, pulling out, like in a sense, with the uprooting. Actually, it is almost something like in a fact, like in a sense, uproot and throw it away, lock, stock, and barrel. But would that augur well with an anthropologist? So my point is that, like in a sense, there has been a thorough revision, re-revision by anthropologists, especially by the turn of 1990s, that the position of cultural relativism has been very seriously questioned. And especially anthropologists have agreed to be ethical relativists rather than cultural relativists, actually. So from that particular viewpoint, as we can see, like many anthropologists, like they're trying to re-examining the potential of anthropology and its research to serve as an agent of social transformation. Even more urgently, they have been striving to transform the objectives or the objectivist modes of ethnography that feminist, post-colonial, and indigenous critics have brought in, actually. And we have seen Zavella 1997, Fabian. We also have seen Edward Said, Abu Luhard, Narayan, all these people, like in a sense, they were coming from different perspectives with regard to post-colonialism, post-modernism, like feminist discourses, indigenous kind of a critics of anthropological works and all. They brought up a new kind of a discourse that what are the like in a sense what outcomes of ethnographic research. So therefore it becomes imperative for anthropologists to reflect on, represent, and consciously say resituate their disciplines deep engagement and social commitments, actually expand rather than contract the responsibilities to produce ethnographic research that serves communities and that confronts the modes of thought as well as institutions which reproduce hierarchies of domination, oppression, and inequality. If you take this kind of a position, Ambedkar probably a century ago, what he was doing actually becomes, in fact, a kind of a responsibility of an anthropologist. This is exactly what I try to say place before you in the opening kind of this thing. And as we see, like in a sense, mostly of the younger generation anthropologists, they are very vocal, vehement that anthropology must look into the problems of the society that they study upon. We start from Stuart Kirsch, 2002, when he was working with the New Guinea. He feels that, I quote, activism is the logical extension of the commitment to reciprocity that underlines the practice of anthropology, unquote. And Victoria Sanford, in 2005, she advocates that, I quote, our experience in the practice of anthropology point to the ethical engagement as a primary responsibility of the researcher rather than an optional mode of dissemination. She is saying that it's a kind of an important, or a primal kind of a responsibility of anthropologists to get engaged with the problems and then mitigating the problems of the subjects that we study it. And then Stratton and Stewart, they conclude that resulting commitments may mandate engagement and also advocacy on our part rather than a scholarly neutral stance. The notions of right and wrong can be invoked not only in relation to the truth, but also with regard to the cause of social justice. And we'll go to another kind of a young brand of anthropologists, that is Castillo and Aldo Cavio in 2006. They plead for an anthropology which could comprehend and systematically account for humans' changing struggle for liberation from oppressive social and political institutions. The same position we know, the like in a sense, people like Delheims from say like in a sense the Latin America, who's talked about liberation anthropology, and we have many, Andre Gunther Frank, who actually like in a sense conceived liberation anthropology to the kind of public anthropology, practice anthropology, even to say Sherry Ortner, dark anthropology, where anthropologists' duty is to look into the problems of the society and try to resolve certain of the issues through their intensive kind of a research. So similarly, Philip Bourgeois in 2006, he underscores that, quote, as a discipline, anthropology largely missed the macro and micro facts of colonization, capitalism, genocide, and revolution over past century, despite being an eyewitness to these processes. He says, let us not repeat that history today. And of course, many of the Latin American, especially Brazilian anthropologists, like say João Bale in 2007 says that, I quote, anthropology needs to develop a listening capacity and engage in an activist way to become involved with the problem, not just to observe it from a distance. So I can go on, like said, there are many anthropologists like of the turn of the 21st century who call for more engagement, and then try to be like in a sense so active to attack the oppressive systems and institutions. And it is not this young team of anthropologists. If you look into the antecedents of anthropology, right from say 18th century or even 19th century, we find many anthropologists, they also were activists to an extent. Starting from Morgan, we know pretty well. Morgan, he worked with Iroquois Indians, in US, eastern part of US. He has become, in fact, now adopted as a member of the Iroquois community, and being a lawyer himself, he took up the cases of, in fact, in the Iroquois tribal land rights in the courts of New York. So he was an activist that way. And we know Franz Boas being a German Jew, migrated to US and settled out there in the Columbia University, being called as the father of American anthropology. He himself was, in fact, a public anthropologist, giving public talks on anti-racism. And we also know Melninsky was warning anthropologists not to be, like in a sense, say, not to be chartered spies or esponages for the governments in the World War. And I want to bring in a very, very influential and very powerful anthropologist in the name of Margaret Mead. She has been a great public intellectual, and she was very vocal on many issues. We know pretty well Margaret Mead, in fact, now has been instrumental in bringing a lot of changes in American society by her talks, and she brought in the feminist kind of a discourse in anthropology even in 1920s. And yes, we also know about W.E.B. Du Bois being the first Afro-American anthropologist to secure a PhD and teach anthropology. He was pretty well into activist research. And W.B. Dubai and Dr. Ambedkar, both of them, in fact, had a lot of exchanges. There are a lot of correspondence between them. And when Dubai was, like in a sense, taking up the issues of race and racism, say in the United States, Dr. Ambedkar, in fact, wrote to him several times, and they exchanged communication. Ambedkar was talking about the issue of caste in Indian society. So therefore, friends, we have, yes, Montag, Evans Pritchard, many others. In fact, no, there are general intellectuals who engaged in a kind of a direct action of anthropologists. Not to, like in a sense, leave the name of Levi-Strauss. Levi-Strauss, in fact, no, with all his kind of a gubernational, say, kind of field work, he was there in Africa. He was there, in fact, no, in South America. He was, of course, there in many parts, including India, and also he was in Dhaka, Bangladesh. He was in Calcutta. So, because of his, in fact, no exposure, being a French anthropologist, he went ahead to say that if at all, like in a sense, say he has to brand himself, he said he will call himself as the fourth worldist in a third world country. That means he want to take up the, say, kind of a side of the oppressed communities and see that, in fact, their issues are mitigated. So therefore, friends, that way we have a tradition of anthropology, but there also, in fact, has been overwhelming anthropologists who talk about the neutral stand. But in India, earlier, like in a sense, anthropologists like Patrick Geddes, and then you have Sarich Chandra Roy, we also have Elvin, and then Nirmal Kumar Bose. All these people, they came into the discipline through their involvement in urgent social issues. That has been, in fact, now standing kind of a thing. And we also are aware of the recent, say, activist roles by anthropologists like Felix Padal, the great grandson of Charles Darwin, being a British anthropologist. He had been staying in India for about 2 decades, and he was the one who has been actively involved in the Niyamgiri agitation by the Niyamgiri, the Dongoria counts against the mighty Vedanta boxing mining organization. And we also know of the Delhi University intellectual Nandini Sundar, who fought on behalf of, in fact, no, the Gotikoyas, and she who fought against the government of Chhattisgarh in farming a salva judum, and then taking up recruiting, say, the young tribes, adolescent tribes, in fact, now special police officers. So we know of all these things, and we know the importance of anthropologists, in fact, now as very, very active, playing an active role in the public life, taking up the issues of the people. But on the hindsight, we know the overwhelming, in fact, no, the impression of anthropologists is just to stick on to the ethical relativism. But we know, like in a sense, the criticism of Thomas, say Erickson, a Norwegian anthropologist, who was saying that anthropologists are found wanting in the recent times when there is an escalation of, in fact, no crisis in the human societies. He was saying, I quote, anthropology is exceptionally relevant as a tool for understanding the contemporary world, yet anthropology is absent from nearly every important public debate. There are more of us anthropologists than ever before, yet fewer reach out to communicate with the wider world. As anthropology has grown, its perceived wide relevance, in fact, now has diminished. So, friends, that being the background, in fact, which I would like to talk about, see, I would like to say that 21st century belongs to the activist anthropologist. 21st century belongs to the public anthropologist. 21st century belongs to, in fact, to the engaged, kind of anthropology. So, wherein we find Ambedkar being an activist anthropologist way back almost a century ago, 1916s, when he talks, in fact, 1927, he started his public activity with the Mahad tank and all. You'll see Ambedkar as an anthropologist, working with, as an activist anthropologist. And he, like in a sense, in the book, or the kind of undelivered speech that he published later on, with the title called as Annihilation of Caste, he writes And I quote, he says, in the first place, he was addressing the Hindus there. The Hindus must consider whether it is sufficient to take the placid view of the anthropologist, that there is nothing to be said about beliefs, habits, morals, and outlooks of life which obtain among different peoples of the world except that they differ, or whether it is not necessarily necessary to make an attempt to find out what kind of morality, what kind of beliefs, habits, and outlook that have worked best and have enabled those who possess them to flourish and to be strong. So here he was taking an activist kind of a position. He was questioning the placid attitude of cultural relativist position of anthropologists, and he's saying that is it not necessary that we should look into that kind of a morals, that kind of in fact no values of different kinds of societies, and we'll find the best ones to be emulated and brought in over here. So he was in fact now exhorting the people, and also in fact now making a kind of a pathway for the anthropologists to do so. So with this kind of a background, friends, let us see how Ambedkar, as a kind of an action anthropologist or activist anthropologist, coming into mitigating the issue of caste, annihilation of caste in Indian society. So he's called for annihilation of caste, and the reasons he has brought in as to why to get rid of caste, they have been very well articulated in his undelivered speech, which has been later published in 1936 with the same title called as Annihilation of Caste. This title, of course, is in fact now derived from there. And in this particular speech and the booklet, Ambedkar lays down his blueprint for reconstruction of Indian society. Being such a stupendous work of a genius, this speech, friends, has been reprinted several times in various languages over the past 85 years, because it got first published in 1936. And pertinent to note here is that it was Periyar who got it translated first in Tamil from English, and Ambedkar wrote it in English. He got it translated in 1937 itself. Like not, it's not in Marathi which had been translated, but it was Periyar immediately, like in sense, even almost 6-7 months after the publication in English, he got it translated into Tamil actually. So that was a kind of a powerful kind of an argument, and a very, very realistic kind of a presentation that Ambedkar has brought in. And yeah, this speech has been prepared by Ambedkar on the invitation of a organization called as Jat Path Todak Mandal of Amritsar. The very, like in a sense, name of the organization says that Jat is caste, Patak is in, they say that caste has in fact now has become a sin. Jat Path Todak Mandal, an organization which wants to in fact now wash away the sins of caste. So, but point is that he was invited in 1935 to act as the president of their conference. And who were these people? These people were the paternalistic Savarna Hindus belonging to the Arya Samaj and Hindu Mahasabha. We know pretty well, like in the sense, who started Arya Samaj. It was Dayanand Saraswati in 1875. He started Arya Samaj in Nasik. And we know Hindu Mahasabha, which was formed in 1922. 1920, it was Hindu Sabha. 1922, it became Hindu Mahasabha. And many of these proponents of Hindu Mahasabha later on in 1925 became the activists in today's RSS, basically. So these people, they want to, like in a sense, organize a conference on the name of Jat Path Todak Mandal, and they have invited particularly Dr. Ambedkar to preside over that particular conference. And the context of inviting Ambedkar, especially, it has a special significance. Why? Because, friends, Ambedkar's incisive analysis of caste, even as a postgraduate student, third semester postgraduate student in 1916 in Columbia University, has unearthed so many, in fact, no hitherto unseen dimensions of the caste. He could see the link between caste and gender. He could establish that castes have been born and also have been maintained on the oppression of women. That has been an eye-opener actually for many. And his struggle, in fact, now for reclaiming the human rights or a human personality to the oppressed majority, Ambedkar exposed the denial of social economic rights in his agitation, which is called in the Mahad Tank agitation in 1925. Then 1927, I'm sorry. Then in 1929 to 1930, he has given a call for a temple entry movement to test, in fact, now whether the right to religion is operational or not. So this temple entry movement, in fact, now has been organized first in Kalaram temple, Nasik, then in many temples in Pune, Nagpur, like Kolhapur, and many parts of Maharashtra. And of course, later on, Ambedkar said his intention was not to enter into temples and do bhajans and all, but he wants to expose the fallacy of that kind of say paternalistic kind of a slogan saying that the Hindu Savarna Hindus are very welcoming the so-called untouchables that time to enter into the temples. But in reality, no, not a single temple, in fact, now opened its doors to these despised people. So then, of course, in 1930 to 1932, three round table conferences. Ambedkar, in fact, now has been fighting for the civil and political rights in the round table conferences. So this has been the background. 1927 to 1932, Ambedkar, in fact, now finally could secure the communal award by the British government, which has been thoroughly opposed by Mr. Gandhi, prompted by the Hindu Mahasabha. And if anybody knows about the Pune Pact, which is called as the great understanding of kind of between Gandhi and Ambedkar, people talk about, in fact, no, Pune Pact has been a pact, an understanding between Gandhi and Ambedkar. But Gandhi, that was the only time, in fact, no, he went on fast unto death, opposing, in fact, no, the special representation to the say depressed classes. That was the only time. But the actual signatories on the Pune Pact was not Gandhi. The actual signatories, of course, from this side is Ambedkar and N. Shivadas, and there are Rajboj, there are many other people from this party. And the other party which signed was Hindu Mahasabha, not Mr. Gandhi, actually. Gandhi was only facilitating that party. So therefore, the stiff opposition of Hindu Mahasabha and Gandhi to the representational rights conferred in the communal award made them realize that caste society, like in a sense, there Ambedkar says, when these people are doing all these things, when he also secured a kind of a civic and political rights, when these people were opposing tooth and nail, he realized, Ambedkar realized that caste society is inimical to equality. It is inimical to equality, adverse to liberty, and hostile to fraternity. He understood very clearly that, in fact, no, it is a system which has become, in fact, no, the kind of a what do you call the bulwark of all kinds of opposition to create a kind of a democratic society. He has secured, in fact, no, a modicum of political rights while being a member of the Lothian Committee from 1932 to 1934, also a member of the Indian Franchise Committee, which has drafted 1935 say Government of India Act. Then in 1935, when he could secure certain rights in the Government of India Act for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. And in October 1935, Ambedkar has organized a meeting in Yola in Maharashtra, and declared saying that he was born accidentally as a Hindu and he would not die as a Hindu. When that declaration came in October, the invitation to attend as the president of Jat Pat Todak Mandal comes from Amritsar 2 months after, that is in December 1935. So that means it's a kind of a what do you call a knee-jerk reaction that they want to call Ambedkar, listen to him, and then make some kind of a patch-up that he should not leave Hinduism per se. So this was the kind of a thing that Ambedkar went to, and Ambedkar could understand the soft Hindutva model of, in fact, no, remodeling caste society, or in fact, no, like remodeling the Hindu society or reforming the Hindu society, as mentioned by the letters of Santram and Har Bhagwan, representing Jat Sanopat Todak Mandal. Because by the time, in fact, no, like in a sense, the RSS has been formed, and the Hindutva model of, in fact, no, operating, calling India's tradition as a Sanatan, all these things have come up. We have the four Hindutva ideologues: Savarkar, Dayanand Saraswati, Arabindo, and Vivekananda. They all, in fact, not together started this kind of a, what you call, a religious political model of claiming, in fact, no, the kind of a ruling. Even if suppose the British depart from this country, they were claiming that they want to become the true rulers. So therefore, when Muslims saying that on the pretext of being Muslims, a kind of a religious competition is going on over there over the ruling of this country actually. So and Ambedkar could understand the soft Hindutva kind of a model of these people when they were trying to become paternalistic in making kind of a comment saying that we are committed to remodel Hindu society or reform Hindu society. And that particular context, Ambedkar sought to clarify that Hindu society is not fit for reform as it is. That was the message, in fact, now he's trying to give in this particular thing. And his daring exposition, friends, can be understood by the quotes on the very cover page, in fact, now calling for the rationality of Buddha and the reason by well-known philosopher H. Drummond. And Ambedkar sets the tone for a very, very scathing elucidation of the society founded on the wrong ideals. And he quotes Buddha saying, "Know the truth as truth and untruth as untruth." And he brought in a quotation by Drummond, which says, I quote, "He that will not reason is a bigot. He that cannot reason is a fool. He that dare not reason is a slave." And this is what, in fact, Drummond talking about. And Ambedkar brings in that kind of, the quote to explain the kind of, in fact, the inability or, in fact, like in a sense, incapacity of the people who continue living in the culture of caste, basically. So Ambedkar, very much in his own preface of that particular book called Annihilation of Caste, he mentions very clearly the position. I would like to make it very clear that he was not against Hinduism. Although Ambedkar talks, in fact, that caste is the official doctrine of Hinduism, but Ambedkar makes it very, very clear what exactly he is attacking. He attacks the caste system, and he knows and he explains the root cause or the origination of the caste system. In the preface itself, I would like to quote saying that he says, "I do not care for the credit which every progressive society must give to its rebels." So he is positioning himself as a rebel. And he was writing in the preface itself, "It is on your invitation I'm here. It is not my choice. You wanted me here. And when I finish my presidential address, you will try to find me that I'm like a snake in your garden." So he gives all kinds of kind of a what do you call uh, clarity of position, in fact, from his side. So therefore he says in the preface, "I shall be satisfied if I make the Hindus realize that they are the sick men of India and their sickness is causing danger to health and happiness to other Indians," unquote. So here he was saying, I would like to repeat this particular quotation in the preface once again. He says that I shall be satisfied if I make the Hindus realize that they are the sick men of India. And what is their sickness? He says the sickness is caused by this structural kind of a system called as caste system. And what is, in fact, the origination of caste system? Ambedkar says that caste system or the Varna caste system has nothing to do with Hinduism. This is a wonderful kind of a exposition which Ambedkar makes, in fact, with a lot of evidences. Probably, like in the sense, hitherto Ambedkar, no one would have brought in this kind of a position and clarity. He was saying that the problem is not with Hinduism, but with Brahminism, which has been the sickness, actually. And he squarely blames, I quote, Brahminism in instituting caste system has put the greatest impediment against the growth of nationalism in India. So he was not just trying to blame Brahminism for the origination and maintenance and operation of caste system, but also being a greatest impediment for a nationalism among the people or the citizens of India in a free India, basically. So therefore, this is the crux of Ambedkar's argument. He says that Hinduism is now, like in a sense, contracted with a virus called as caste system, virus called as Brahminical, in fact, no ideology. So this is what he says, and that's the reason why he says caste is a very potent virus, which in fact now plagues the kind of a society and the minds of the people for over centuries. Unless otherwise, if you try to tackle, if you do not try to tackle it, that's what he says. So therefore, my dear friends, when you talk about Brahminism, where from this came? Ambedkar explained in very, very detail what is Brahminism and how, in fact, now it has created a system of caste, and it also has created a gender system, patriarchy. Patriarchy and caste system, they both are products of an ideology called as Brahminism. And by operationalizing caste and by operationalizing the patriarchy, Brahminical ideology gets its own, in fact, now, what do you call, respiration. So probably, like in a sense, we have dealt with this very deeply in one of our topics, where we talked about the Indian society, caste and Indian society. When we, I think so, we have dealt with it very, very deeply. But here, Ambedkar says that Brahminism and this Varna caste system has come into Indian society because of the Aryan entry into India. He says that in many details, in fact, like in a sense, it is the Aryans who brought the caste system and Varna system into the Indian society. There are several references, and of course, in the popular reference, I think so, many people, if you go into Google and talk about, in fact, about Ambedkar and Aryan thing and all, there will be several references to Ambedkar's work called as who were Shudras and how they have become fourth Varna in this society, wherein Ambedkar, in fact, no, at one point says Aryanism has not been a race, and Aryanism, in fact, no, has a matter of culture. That has a context, actually. Apart from that, of course, even in, if you look into that book called as Who Were Shudras, Ambedkar's book, where Ambedkar follows the biological anthropological genetic markers called as the oligocephaly, mesocephaly, and the cephalic index. He was in fact using them to explain who are these people and what are their racial kind of a say background with the cephalic index. That was the nasal index, was the kind of like in a sense ongoing thing at the time of 1920s. Later on, genetic markers changed from anthropometry to nasal index, then to serology. Now, in fact, now we are gone to DNA, actually. So he was using that, but finally, like in a sense, in Who Were Shudras, he puts a map over there, clearly shows that the Aryans, in fact, now the Europeans came into India. The Aryan pastoral nomads came into India from two routes, actually. So therefore, Ambedkar says that this Brahminism and the unequal Varna caste system has been the product which has been brought in by the Aryan entry into this country. And he says that there has been proto-Shamanism following many of the, say, like in the historians. Ambedkar, in fact, says that Indus Valley has a kind of a proto-Shamanic kind of a, this thing. And somebody, people talk about the priest, in fact, has been the Mundaka, the Yeti, the kind of a Muni, which were referred by, in fact, no, later on Shramanic tradition in India, where, as against the Vedic tradition, even before the Vedic tradition, in India, there was a great Shramanic philosophy, which has been, in fact, no, came into much of its glory with Charvaka, Lokayatas, Madhyamikas, Sankhya, Kapila. Then you have, in fact, no, like Makkal Gosal, Asita Kese Kambala, you have Ajivikas, then you have Mahavir Jains, and then Buddhist. So this has been, in fact, no, non-Vedic anti-ritualistic, materialistic and humanistic traditions, which have been very, very sound, in fact, now in Indian philosophy. Of course, the Vedic kind of philosophy, which in fact, now, like in a sense, has been a product of Brahminical kind of a Hinduism, that has been given a lot of propaganda, that in fact consists of this kind of a say Varna caste system. It has given a lot of propaganda, but the Sramanic literature, Sramanic tradition, which has been integral to Indian society, even before the advent of the Aryans into this country, their literature, their traditions have been in fact now become, they became spurious, and the literature in fact now have been distorted or destroyed. That's what Ambedkar says. So Ambedkar in fact now argued with a wealth of textual and historical evidence that the retrogressive nature of Indian history was to be attributed to the presence and operation of caste system, and the ideological institutional stranglehold of Brahminical Hindu religion, not Hindu religion, Brahminical Hindu religion, which resulted in a spiritual fascism. This has been, in fact, now is a large kind of an argument. Actually, I'm not going to into it. If anybody is interested in that, they are very welcome to go into the depths of Ambedkar's exposition of, in fact, now this Brahminical culture and its social products. So that's why Ambedkar calls all philosophies must be judged by their social products. Actually, so in India, Ambedkar says he says that there is no unified society, but has multitudes of societies based on caste. He deliberately says that India doesn't have a society at all, no unified society. It has multitudes of societies as equal to the number of castes. Each caste creates a society by itself, mutually exclusive, actually. So people are born into castes and imbibe such notions of mind which do not allow human interaction among them. And Ambedkar says, I quote again, the first and foremost thing that must be recognized is that Hindu society is a myth. In every Hindu, the consciousness that exists is the consciousness of caste, unquote. And he says that caste system prevents Hindus from becoming a society. Caste has killed the public spirit, the sense of public charity. A Hindu's public is his caste. His responsibility is only to his caste. His loyalty is restricted only to his caste. So this is the kind of an exposition Ambedkar was trying to give in explaining the Varna caste system, in fact, being operational as a kind of a strong structural kind of a framework of the Brahminical Hindu society. And he says, along with this kind of a structure and also operation, the morality and virtues, they also in fact go along with this kind of a inhuman kind of a tradition. He says virtue has become caste ridden and morality has become caste bound. And he says, as a result, a Hindu is a good casteman, but a major failure as a member of the society. And he says, he goes on, in fact, now to the psychological and also behavioral aspects of the members of society. He says that caste makes Hindus to live like rats in a hole. So these are some sort of analogies that he's bringing, saying that in fact now people become blind and they talk about only about the welfare, well-being of their caste people, and they're indifferent towards in fact no others. So this has been an important kind of an area which Ambedkar brings to the fore for a kind of a understanding. And as a result, Ambedkar says it caste system makes the majority weak and a worst lot. So that he goes on, in fact, to explain that. And in bringing in caste society, in bringing in this kind of a caste society, Ambedkar says that Brahminism has committed a treason. Now we are talking about, in fact, no anti, state, anti-nation. Ambedkar says Brahminism has committed a treason against the country and against the society. Caste says that nothing to do with the religion. He says that it has nothing to do with the Hindu religion, but Brahminism basically has been the source of inequality. So long as caste remains, Ambedkar says, Hindu religion cannot be a missionary religion. And he says this religion, which has been formed probably around 11th century AD, because the very word Hindu has been used by Al-Biruni say in 11th century AD itself. Otherwise, we do not find that word Hindu in the whole of Brahminical literature. So therefore, and it was in the 11th century that Nadr tradition owned themselves as Hindus, and that's formed in fact now an amalgamation of Hindu kind of this thing. You can read Romila Thapar for the formation of in fact now religion called as Hindu religion in her book called as Imagined Communities and the Emergence of Hindu Religion. That has been in fact now wonderful kind of an exposition as to how this Hindu religion has become in fact now a kind of an established kind of a thing, elastic, and also in fact now came into being taking into account in fact now many of the different traits. And of course today's Hindutva is entirely different from the formation of religion which we are talking about. So friends, the kind of indifferentism that members of one caste do not bother about the pitiable situation or inhuman in fact no living of others, which we call it as indifferentism. Ambedkar says this indifferentism is the worst kind of a disease that can infect people. He goes on to say it is the result of caste system which has made Sangatan, that means organization, a cooperation, and cooperation even for a good cause, impossible. So that is the reason why Hindus cannot be said to form a society or more so a nation. He said they cannot in fact know with all these kind, they can't form a society, and they cannot in fact know form a very, very vibrant kind of a nation at all. So that was Ambedkar's critic in fact now with regard to the caste system. He says these are the consequences. And Ambedkar says that the ethnocentric belief that the Hindu social system has been perfected for all times, that the system has been Sanatan, which that particular understanding has prevented the reconstruction of this society and stood in the way for a revision for the common good of the large humanity. He said that it has been a Sanatan, it was born somewhere else, and it will be there for years together. That particular understanding, in fact, that belief, which Ambedkar calls it as the ethnocentric belief, actually, that has become an impediment for revaluation or revision of in fact now the society to become in fact now a kind of a humane society. So therefore for Ambedkar it was not merely a question of saving untouchables, as many people say that Ambedkar was only talking about the ex-untouchables, but it was saving India through saving untouchables. This is in fact now some way reminiscent of the Marxist agenda, where Marx says in fact now the proletariat by liberating themselves they liberate the whole society. So thereby Ambedkar in fact now takes up a position that the ex-untouchables by liberating themselves they liberate the whole Indian society. So he says that in fact now the liberation is because once the process of gaining social justice by the lower caste starts, it would regenerate India as a nation by undermining the caste system, which was its foundation. So this is the kind of a operational and a practical reason and logic that Ambedkar brings in. So friends, as we know, Ambedkar has been the first social scientist to find out several facets of dehumanization in caste system, which has been powered through the engine of religion. Before Ambedkar, we know several attempts, in fact, have been made to paint caste only as a social aberration. And we are very, very clear by now that Ambedkar has shown caste is not just a social kind of inequality. Caste system, in fact, now is an economic exploitation. It's a political oppression, and it has several, in fact, now facets of dehumanization. So he very clearly talked about, in fact, now demonstrated that caste system is the denial of the right to existential dignity for the majority. He says that caste system, in fact, now in operation is the denial of the existential dignity, and thereby the denial of existential dignity leads to denial of right to identity, leads to the denial of choice of occupation, leads to the denial of ownership or control over in fact no resources of the society. He has given lots of in fact no loss of human rights, denial of human rights by the caste system actually. And taking the system by the horns, Ambedkar waged a relentless struggle against this diabolical contrivance. He debunked the divine origins of caste. He says that caste has not been a divine creation. And he declared that caste is a device designed to divide. Very, very simple, straight kind of thing. He says caste is a device. Device means a tool. And every tool that we make has a function. So he says that caste doesn't have any divine origin. It is a device designed to divide the people, divide the majority into small parcels of, in fact, no caste, whereby a minority can dominate over the majority groups actually. So therefore, friends, revealing that caste system as anti-human, anti-social, anti-national, Ambedkar proclaims, I quote, unless the social order is changed, no progress could be achieved. The community cannot be mobilized either for defense or offense. And he declares, nothing can be built on the foundations of caste. No nation, no morality. So this has been, in fact, no, is considered kind of a declaration over here. And there he takes on, in fact, no, the Arya Samajas and the people of Hindu Mahasabha, when they were coming up with kind of a remodeling Hinduism, saying that they say that we are against caste, but we wanted a kind of a regenerated Varna model to come in. We pretty well know that Arya Samajas say that let's go back to the Vedas, and then let us go back, in fact, no, form ourselves as Varnas. So Ambedkar, in fact, now has rebunked the kind of a eulogization of the reformistic Varna system in the 20th century, that time, by Arya Samajists and Hindu Mahasabha. And he maintains that, I quote, only a congenital idiot would try to revive the Varna. And it goes on to explain the impracticability and like in a sense, and the absurdness, in fact, no, of trying to regenerate the Varna in 21st century. So this being, in fact, no, the reason, these are the reasons why Ambedkar said that caste has to be, like in a sense, pulled down. Otherwise, he says no nationality, no morality, no society, no humane foundations. And he says that the system, in fact, now has been a kind of a virus, it's a disease that Indians must get rid of. But the question, logical question would come. Some people would ask, if castes are destroyed, then how would, in fact, there will be kind of a marriage? How would, in fact, like in a sense, it operates and it decides many of the regulates many aspects of the kinship. Friends, the answer, in fact, Ambedkar provides is that before the Aryans came into India, there was no caste, no varnas. You don't find caste in Indus Valley civilization. You don't find caste, in fact, no, in 3000 BC, where you have Shodasa Mahajanapada, where there was Gana systems, where there was proto-republics up there actually. You don't have caste over there. So therefore, he comes to the aspect of, in fact, now, how to annihilate the caste. Okay, fine. He argues that, in fact, now caste system is very, very detrimental to the interest of humanity in India. But the point is, then how to get rid of the caste? How to annihilate, in his own words, the caste actually. So now if you go into the modalities, in the same very, in fact, now book, Ambedkar says, I quote, the real remedy for breaking caste is intermarriages. So we know pretty well, caste system, in fact, now has been a result of endogamy. Members of the caste, they marry within the same religion, same caste actually. And and he says that, like, if people stop marrying with the same caste, obviously there would not be caste at all actually. So for a kind of, in fact, no, a glance, for any logical mind, it appears intercaste marriages are the solution for breaking up the caste actually, dissolution of the caste actually. So that's why he says the remedy for breaking caste is the intermarriages. Nothing else will serve as the solvent of caste. If you want to dissolve and then destroy caste, it will be a solvent, intercaste marriages. But again, he questions, but is your prescription the right prescription for the disease, which we call it as caste system actually? And he says in the negative, practically, okay, fine, intercaste marriages, basically they will dissolve caste. But is it the real medicine for the disease. He says he unravels the hidden reality of the caste, where he says, I quote, caste is the notion. Caste doesn't have any physical propensities. You can't see caste, you can't smell caste, you can't touch caste, you can't, in fact, no, have a form of caste. That's why he says caste is the notion. It is a state of the mind. That's where he says. And if you want to destroy caste, Ambedkar says the destruction of the caste system is that you need to go for a notional change, a change in the mindset, a change in the attitude. So that is where Ambedkar, in fact, now brings in the real, what we call as the secret of, in fact, now the caste system, where he says Brahminism is the cultural colonization, actually. And Brahminism has encultured the Varna and caste among the minds of the people. So this is where he brings in the kind of a logic, saying that caste as a system, in fact, now has been introduced into this society lately through enculturation, which of course sociologists call it as socialization. He says that the idea of caste, the ideas of caste, the ideas of low and high, the ideas of caste behavior, caste sanctioned kind of a, in fact, no regulation, they all enter into the minds of the children. When we are born, we are not born with caste actually. Maybe like in a sense, we are born to parents who belong to some caste, but you don't have any information about caste. But how does you get informed by the text of caste? How does we get, in fact, to the knowledge of caste system? How do we know about the identity of caste? How do we know? How do we get trained that some other person, she or he belongs to a caste which is superior to us, which is inferior to us? Friends, all these kinds of socialization, all these kinds of information comes to us. We get trained to the enculturation process, which has been very, very important to the formation of personality among, in fact, now like individuals in a particular culture. Anthropologists, in fact, the cultural personality school clearly talks about the importance of enculturation in forming the basic personality of an individual within a culture. So therefore, Ambedkar says that caste, in fact, now has not no roots at all. This is a kind of a system which has been encultured. If it is encultured, Ambedkar says that also can be decultured. If caste system has been there with us, it has been, in fact, no informed as a kind of a structure. It has been here, in fact, no, we are being culturalized into the caste. There is every possibility. If you want to destroy caste, if you do the reverse, if you want to decastify, then you have to deculturize actually. You need to get de-Brahminized. That is the logic that Ambedkar brings in. So he says that there must be reevaluation of the values, morality of the society to expel the values and morality based on the unequal system called as caste system. So there must be a reinterpretation, repositioning, re-evaluation of, in fact, no, the morals of the society. So therefore, here Dr. Ambedkar talks about, in fact, no, decastifying, de-Brahminizing, deculturizing, and enculturing, in fact, no, the democratic values in a kind of an unequal society based on the caste society. So therefore, friends, Ambedkar shows the crux of the problem as he declares the real enemy is not the people who observe caste. Even, in fact, no, those who are high or low, even somebody is a Brahmin or somebody, in fact, is a low. Ambedkar finds that the individuals are not bad. The individuals who behave like that are not bad. He says that the real enemy is not the people who observe caste, but the Brahminical Shastras that teach them this religion of caste. That's what he says. That is, the problem is with the people who get encultured with this religion of caste, with the system of caste. And he says, okay, they shun social intercourse with fellow human beings, not because they're inhuman or wrong-headed, but because they're deeply religious. And the myriad hierarchies and taboos of caste, friends, have the sanctity of these Brahminical Shastras. People will not change their conduct unless They have ceased to believe in the sanctity of these Shastras. So therefore, Ambedkar starts dealing with the location of the disease and the available prescription. He says that the disease is not in fact no among the people. The disease in the minds of the people, and the disease basically is the root cause of caste system, is the religion of the caste system, or the Brahminical in fact no say a kind of a ideology which brought in this kind of inequality. So therefore he finds the location of the disease and now goes for the prescription, and he says that, I quote, if you wish to bring a breach in the system, if you want to pull down the system, if you want to blast away the system, you have to got apply the dynamite to the Vedas and Shastras, which teach this unequal kind of a kind of a behavior. Nothing else will avail. So then, while talk about this, then he says, now he dares the Hindus. In fact, now when he's talking about Hindu Mahasabha, and now he says that my challenge to the Hindus is that, will you show that courage to get rid of your disease? I now talked about this disease. I have now analyzed your problem. I have analyzed your disease, and I now found the location, the right location of your disease, and I'm prescribing you the solution. And he says that I challenge you. Do you have the courage to get rid of your disease? So that is, in fact, now what Ambedkar says. Emphasizing the ways and means to destroy caste, he asks for a complete change in the fundamental notion and values of life, wherein he says, I quote, Hindus must consider whether the time has come for them to recognize that there is nothing fixed, nothing eternal, nothing sanatan, that everything is changing, that change is the law of life for individuals as well as for the society. In a changing society, there must be constant revolution of old values, and the Hindus must realize that if there must be a standard to measure the acts of men, there must also be a readiness to revise those standards. So he was saying that this is the kind of a thing that we talks about. There must be revaluation of morals and in fact no the kind of a beliefs in the system. So this is how, this is the way out, Ambedkar says. We have seen why he is giving a call for annihilation of caste, and now he's saying, he talked about how to do it. Then of course, my dear friends, at the like in a sense, what is the utility of annihilating caste? It is not just for the Hindus. He says that annihilation of the caste is essential for establishing a democratic society in India, and it is the first step towards national building. Ambedkar says that this is the first step towards a democratic nation building, actually. So, friends, as a great nation builder, Ambedkar deserves the credit of shaping modern India, not just as a mere political institution or a mere political democratic republic, but laying its foundations on civility, on the civic kind of kind of understanding, on restructuring the social and economic basis of the society. He approached the problem from the wider perspective of nationalism, democracy, humanity, and justice being informed to all citizens. He is now not talking about only the ex-untouchables. He is not talking only about the backward classes. Ambedkar takes the position, in fact, now of the making a democratic nation, and he says, "My goal is to elevate the members of the caste to be equal citizens of this country." That has been, in fact, now his vision. And he took up the reconstruction of the society and the foundation of democracy. We pretty well know that. In order to establish an inclusive society, Ambedkar looks at democracy not as a political arrangement, but as mode of associated life. That's very, very important. And he says the roots of democracy are to be searched in social relationship, in terms of associated life between people who form the society. So therefore, friends, he take it actually, where from he got this kind of a thing. Yes, Ambedkar has taken cues from his master, his teacher. Of course, Ambedkar says that there are three masters for him, three teachers that he respects. One is Lord Buddha, the second is Kabir, and third is Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. And in the academic side, Ambedkar says that his mentor was Professor Janduvi, professor of philosophy at Columbia University, where Ambedkar studied. Because Janduvi, in fact, now is an existentialist, is renowned as, in fact, now the kind of a great educational philosopher of American society. And then his books on education and democracy, and in fact, now bringing up a kind of a civil, kind of a society were very, very, what do you call, impactful. And Ambedkar takes cue from him. And Ambedkar says that, in fact, now he has modeled his personality. He has modeled, in fact, now his ambitions based on Professor Dewey's lectures. And Dewey explains that human society should have organic filaments, an attitude of respect and equality towards fellow human beings. Ambedkar envisioned nation as a social amalgamation which elevates the low caste into the citizens of equality. Ambedkar's philosophy of constitutionalism, friends, revolved around change through perfectly constitutional means. His desire to create an equal society through the process of constitutional making itself. He dreamt of an India where there would be no discrimination between man and woman, no exploitation, no untouchability, and no degradation. Speaking at the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar clearly stated his position, as many of us we know. I quote, political democracy cannot last unless there lies its base, the social democracy. He says that social democracy, in fact, no, have definitely would be the base of any political democracy. Without that, a political democracy shall not prevail. He says that. What does social democracy mean? He says it means a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, fraternity as principles of life. These principles are not to be treated as separate items in a trinity. They form a unity of trinity in the sense that to diverge one from the other is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. So he was trying to operationalize these things, in fact, into a kind of a fulcrum where social economic democracies are to be should be the foundation of a political democracy. So, friends, we know the Constitution of India, it bears the impressions of Dr. Ambedkar, his thought and a key instrument for national reconstruction. But unmitigated contradictions, we know Ambedkar was not completely unaware of those things. He resulted in a situation where today we find that the laws are on the side of inequality, and the customs and values, moralities of the people are on the side of inequality. This is a kind of a contradiction, and this paradox has been explained by Ambedkar. He says that there is today in India an incompatibility of ideologies, and he says, I quote, Indians today are governed by two different ideologies. Their political ideologies, set in the preamble of the Constitution, affirms a life of liberty, equality, and fraternity, but their social ideal, embodied in their religion, denies them. Actually, this has been the contradiction. So, therefore, he warns about the twin enemies of Indian society. The twin enemies are Brahminism and capitalism. He says that it is the Brahminism which enslaves your mind by saying that giving sanctity to this unequal system, it enslaves your mind. Brahminism enslaved your mind, and capitalism, it loots your pocket. That's why he says Brahmin Banya, kind of a tyranny. He says India has a tyranny by the Brahmin Banya kind of a setup, and he says let not tyranny has the freedom to enslave. That is the warning kind of he says, and he exhorts that in clear terms that the existence of caste is the standing denial of democracy. In a simple and very, very vehement kind of an exposition, he says that if there is a caste system in operation, that it shows very clearly that you don't have democracy at all. So, friends, Ambedkar also recognized the fact that the lofty ideals expressed in the Constitution would remain as they were, given the nature of the contradiction we are talking about. He stated, we must begin by acknowledging the fact that there is complete absence of two things in Indian society. One of these is equality. On the social plane, we have India, a society based on principles of graded inequality, which is, of course, the caste system. which means elevation for some and degradation for others. On the economic plane, we have a society in which there are some who have immense wealth as against many who live in abject poverty. So this is the situation which Ambedkar is talking about, in fact, now probably around 75 years ago. Friends, even they're true even today, actually, in the 21st century. So therefore, he makes a kind of an this thing. He says that there must be revelation of thought. Caste is the disease of the mind. When he says it's a notion of the mind. So therefore, you have to revalue, revalidate the values and moralities. And he says that Indians should adopt the democratic kind of a mindset, where he says a mind which is mindful of others is the awakened mind. So he says that caste, in fact, no blinds your eyes. Caste, in fact, no restricts our activities and operation, all our, in fact, no like human capabilities of charity, of being, in fact, loyalty. It restricts only to the caste. Ambedkar says you have to come out of these things. You have to, like in a sense, bring down these cripples, bring down these barriers, and then become human being. Do not become just caste man, actually, and you would become a rats in a hole. And therefore, he says a mind which is mindful of others as an amalgamation of, in fact, no humanity as a nation, as a society. He says as that is the awakened mind. So therefore, he gives, in fact, no exhortation to the Hindus out there. He says, you must make your efforts to uproot caste and uproot Brahminism, the spirit of inequality. And he says, yours and this cause which has to be done by you, he says, yours is the nation cause, actually. That's what he said. If you want to, in fact, build a democratic nation, you will have to, in fact, take up your cudgels against, in fact, destruction of the caste. He says, in my opinion, only when the Hindu society becomes a casteless society, that it can hope to have strength enough to defend itself. Without such internal strength, Swaraj may turn out to be only a step towards slavery. That's what he said. And where he continues, even if the British depart from India, the mill owners, the landlords, and the Savarnas in this particular society, they bleed the majority of the countrymen. And that is what which worries me, he says that. So therefore, my dear friends, this is, in fact, kind of an exposition Ambedkar made with regard to annihilation of caste. He says it is therefore imperative for the people, imperative for the human beings, imperative for Indians who are capable of thinking, who are capable of reasoning, who are capable, in fact, of rationalizing, basically have the onerous responsibility to annihilate the caste system, and then bring up, in fact, the democratic morals and the democratic values to become equal citizens of this country. And I immensely thank you very much for your attention in listening to this class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Satyapal for your illuminating lecture on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's perspectives on caste and why caste need to be annihilated. So now, dear participants, if you have any questions, please post to those questions to the speaker. If I'm not wrong, I felt it. I listened to the statement that caste system and Hinduism has nothing to do with the caste system. That is interesting. What Ambedkar said. Would you please elaborate a little bit? You already did. But is my statement correct, or you want to correct me?
It is correct position that Ambedkar, in fact, differing from, in fact, no, many of the social scientists that India has, and almost all the exponents on caste system, Ambedkar, in fact, no, has been very, very, like in a sense, highly informed and very highly practical in bringing out that the real problem is not the religion. And he says caste has nothing to do with the religion, nothing to do with the Hindu religion, where he was addressing the so-called Hindus that time. Actually, he says that Hinduism, like in a sense, historically, as we know, as many historians, in fact, talk about, has not been an organized religion. Today's Hinduism has been an amalgamation of many things. Actually, the mother goddesses, the kind of formulations and reformulations within the kind of what do you call a rural religiosity, and also, in fact, no, superimposed by the Vedic male kind of a gods. The like Gail Owen says that, say, today's Hinduism is nothing but a superimposition of Aryan male gods over the native female goddesses. So that has become, in fact, an amalgam only after 11th, 10th, and 11th century AD. So when that word Hinduism come in, and if you systematically look into, I think so, I talked about this particular thing when I talked about religion. I think so, in the topic which I talked about, anthropocentric religion, when Ambedkar called for, he says that religion must not be theocentric, but it must be anthropocentric. That was his statement, saying that a religion shall not be, in fact, no, like relegated or devoted to the gods, assumed gods, but it must be anthropocentric. The center or the benefits of the religion should be to the human beings, actually, who make up the kind of a society. So here, if you look into the definition of religion, a religion systematically says that religion is a set of gods or supernaturals with a particular religious text, with a separate set of rituals and religious personnel. That, in fact, now talks about definition of a religion. If that is applied to today's Hinduism, we will see 6 different religions in today's Hinduism, actually. Why? Because in 6 different stages of Indian history, there are 6 different gods. The gods differ from one stage to another stage. The text different from one stage to another stage. The rituals are different from one stage to other stage. I think so. I explained that particular thing. So therefore, this has been, in fact, no, a later formulation, which today we are calling Hinduism, is a later formulation. But Ambedkar says basically very clearly, just like many of the historians, be Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay, you have, in fact, no, like Romila Thapar, you have scores of historians who very clearly said that the Varna caste system actually has been brought into India by the Aryan entry into this country, which has been Brahminical in origin, actually. So therefore, very clearly Ambedkar takes up that particular thing, and he adds up lots of textual evidences, very many textual evidences, saying that it is this kind of a Brahminical spiritual stranglehold which has brought in this disease of inequality into Hinduism. Otherwise, like in a sense, even village goddesses are part of Hinduism, today's Hinduism, wherein they don't, people, in fact, now in rural areas, they don't, you have, go for consult a Brahmin priest. They have their own priests. Their village goddesses, in fact, no, never talk about inequality. They don't, in fact, no, preach this religion of kind of a caste. So only in these areas, in fact, no, whenever this it comes, the history has been clearly explained. One, and it is there in completely, in fact, no, the Vedic based ideology. You find just 2 references. One is the Rigveda Purishruta. Then, of course, later on, in fact, it is there in the Ityasa, Mahabharata. In fact, you will find Bhagavad Gita, where you find, in fact, no, there he says the kind of a bodily parts of the god becoming into, in fact, originators of different things. But of course, like in the sense, in the later on in Bhagavad Gita, it is said Chaturvarnam Mayam Susti. the basic factors, the factors, in fact, now it was explained saying that guna karma vibhajita. So, but for those two, and later on in popular Hinduism, where you have this Manu, Adharma code, the caste, in fact, now has been very, very clearly becoming the integral part, the Varna and then caste, basically, becoming the integral part of this, operation of this particular Vedic, philosophy. So that is exactly what Dr. Ambedkar says. Hinduism has nothing to do with this inequality. He says, uproot inequality, uproot Brahminism, the spirit of inequality. He says, if you uproot Brahminism, if you take away, dissect out Brahminism, Hinduism has no problem at all, because that is a productive kind of, in fact, like in a sense, a religion. It is an amalgamation, right? So that is what Ambedkar explains. Yeah.
Suresh is asking one question in the message.
Please, yeah. Let me see. Two enemies, twin enemies of democracy. Yes. Is there a relation between Brahminism and capitalism? How it works in India? That's a wonderful question, Suresh. Yes. Actually, I have published a paper on cultural capital in India, basically, which, of course, Ambedkar himself, being an economist, much before Peribordo, talked about culture as capital, basically. Yeah, contemporary society, if you go into the stats, if you look into, there is a very wonderful, in fact, now like a research paper in Economic and Political Weekly, which shows in 2020, the members of the corporate governance, all the corporate bodies and the functionaries of the corporate bodies, it shows very clearly show that 92% basically are from the so-called Brahmin, Kshatriya and Vaishya, and among which you have the majority, in fact, not drawn from the Brahmins. Next comes the Banyas, the Vaishya, actually. So today, if you say in a globalized or a post-globalized world, you will see these are the only two groups that, in fact, dominate the all kinds of businesses, including the IT sector and all kinds of corporates in this country. You just, in fact, have to just look into the number of institutions, financial institutions that India has, and look at the CMDs and also members of the board. You will clearly see that there is a relation between Brahmin and then the Vaishya. They go together. But now I'm talking about Brahminism, and then, in fact, capitalism. Capitalism, we know pretty well, it is the concentration of wealth in few hands. And Brahminism also, in fact, promotes, basically, we call it as Brahminical capitalism. So I would draw your attention to one stat, which is very, very easy to follow. Take India's inequality report by the Oxfam, right from 1991. You can find those stats in your mobile if you Google them. So in 1991, when, in fact, now India has agreed to be globalized, so 10% of the Indian population, 10% of the Indian population, they control 53% of the resources of the country. Okay, all resources put together, 53%. After 10 years, a decade, by 2001, the same 10%, their total control over the resources went up to 57%. Then again, after a decade, 2011, the same 10% people, I'm quoting the stats of Oxfam India inequality report. The same 10% in 2021, their control over the resources went up to 64%. By 2020, the same 10%, their control is by 74% of India's total population. So who are these 10%? It is not very difficult to find who are they. And even 2021, the India inequality report by the Oxfam says that just 1% of Indians, they control more than 59% of the total Indian economy. and you would know who these people are. So therefore, it is not just capitalism in India, it is Brahminical capitalism, where every person cannot become a capitalist. Those Brahminical, in fact, entrenched castes only can become and then survive. So that's the way it goes, actually, like in a sense. I can also explain that's the reason why Ambedkar, being a double doctorate in economics with specialization in fact now public finance, he says that these two actually are the twin enemies of Indian society. Yes, like in a sense, they are quite very pertinently interrelated actually. And I have dealt with this particular issue at length when I dealt with the cultural as cultural capital. I think so. That is one of the topics, and I think so. I would request you to listen to that particular lecture where you'll find at detail. I went to that particular thing with examples. Yeah. uh, of course, this has been Dr. Govind. This particular query has been, in fact, no, a very usual query: how to separate Brahmin from Brahminism and to contextualize annihilation of caste. So, okay, fine. I'll take the first question and then come to that. See, Brahmin is, we know, like in a sense, it has been a Varna and also has been a caste. Fine. If you take Brahmin as a caste, it is one caste among 6,000 castes in India. Of course, Brahmin, in fact, no, the social locale is at the top. They basically, like in a sense, are like appropriated or purported to be the purest and the highest. Okay, fine. As a caste, Brahmin is like that. And Brahminism is an ideology. Brahminism is an ideology in terms of Ambedkar. In the very text called as Annihilation of Caste, Ambedkar says Brahminism is the spirit of inequality. So Brahminism is the spirit of inequality, and the spirit of inequality is not just restricted to Brahmins. It has been there in every mind of the people who make up the caste system. So Brahminism, in fact, now is gradation of people into low and high, has been there in the minds of the top, who are there in the top of the caste hierarchy, and who are also there in the bottommost in hierarchy. You will find Brahminism even on the scheduled caste, among the OBCs, among, in fact, now each and every caste in this country. What is that? Brahminism, in fact, now is like in a sense feeling that we are superior and there are some people who are below us, and we expect respect and reverence from those people, and we express hatred and like in a sense jealousy towards those people actually. So that's the reason why when you see in the operation of the caste, everybody wants to see somebody below them. This kind of a tendency you will see even among the scheduled castes. The scheduled castes themselves discriminate among other scheduled castes actually. They say we are higher and they are lower, so therefore they must be relegated to that particular thing. So even among the Brahmins, they say that the Pujari Brahmin, the priest Brahmin, is superior to Tadinam Brahmin. Actually, I'm talking in Telugu. The Brahmin who officiates the death ceremonies, they behave like a different caste within the Brahminical Varna, because they don't they marry among themselves. There is no intermarriage, and then there is no commensal relation. They don't eat with each other. So therefore, Brahminism, in fact, now is the understanding and also, in fact, now the operation of an unequal system as an ideology. And Brahmin basically is the Varna as well as the caste, basically. But in terms of Ambedkar, he says that we know, like in a sense, if Marx has propagated, proponented, in fact, now an ideology, it went by the name of Marxian ideology. If Gramsci came with it, it's called Gramscian ideology. If Mao came with Maoism, actually, it's called as Leninism. So it goes with the name. But can we have an analogy that Brahminism as an ideology, fine, but who invented Brahminism? So therefore, Ambedkar puts the source even to the Brahmin actually. Why? Because these people basically, not just the Brahmin and the Brahminical groups, the BKV, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, he says these are the beneficiaries of the system. So whosoever are the beneficiaries of the system, they would in fact know, like in a sense, work hard to keep the system intact so that they draw benefits out of it basically. So that is a kind of a operational reality that we need to understand. Yeah.
This actually, during your presentation, sir, you mentioned that the the concept or the term emerged during the 11th century. Actually, these people, the Aryans, invaded India when, and they brought these Vedas and the Brahminism also, they only brought, or it's a later emergence of this thing. So what are before the Aryan invasion, what was the situation of the religion or the equality or inequality concept within the Indian subcontinent? And,
I have already mentioned that before Aryan entry into India, there were no varnas and castes. You don't find them historically period. In fact, if you go into Indus civilization in 3000 BC, there were no castes, no varnas. Indus basically, in fact, has been a democratic civilization. And as a counterpart, like as a contemporary to Indus civilization in the northwest, starting from, in fact, no, like in a sense, Punjab, drawing to the bottom of till Maharashtra, up till the south of Mumbai, you will find Indus Valley civilization there in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. But at the same time, 3000 BC, in India, there are Ganas. There are, in fact, now like in the Janapadas. I think so. There are two kinds of political systems. But 3000 BC, if you look into history of any history, in fact, I would tell you ancient history that Ganas basically are the proto-democratic groups without any head. But Janapadas basically, like in a sense, they have a, like in a sense, people, they have their own representatives, like in a sense. Even Ganatantra, that's why we are today called as Ganatantra Vyavastha. Representatives of the people, they rule on behalf of the public actually. Janapadas basically, like in a sense, they are both are proto-democratic. You will not find like the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya over there, right? And if you see, in fact, no, like Buddha, he was called as a Kshatriya, but he was now not Kshatriya. He was called as Khetiya. Khetiya means agricultural, and he belongs to the Gana society. So there were no castes, no varnas before these people have come. When these people have come, they have, like in a sense, the group which came in are small number, and the area and the land that came under their control was vast. So for a division of labor, they have formed themselves. The Aryans have formed themselves divided themselves into Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas with different kinds of, in fact, no, like duties. So therefore, that has been, like in a sense, very clearly exposed by Ambedkar. He says that when the Aryans came into India, I'm quoting Ambedkar, when the Aryans came into India, they brought this Varna caste system, and this inequality, in fact, now thrived in India. It has been it has a devastating effect on the Indian, say, citizenry. That's what he says. So therefore, before that, it's not there. Only after that, which in fact now created that particular thing. These evidences we have historical evidences for that. We also have linguistic evidences for that, because Sanskrit has been, in fact, now an Indo-European, belongs to Indo-European family of languages. And third, I told you about the genetic research. By the genetic research, today's Brahmins, today's Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, nearly 40% of the genes, they do not belong to the Asians. They belong to the East Europeans, which of course I talked about this particular thing. So therefore, it is scientific fact that they have come in, and it is only after their entry they brought in this system. Before that, it was not there actually. They modeled Indian society into this kind of a thing. And why would they do that? What was the necessity to do that? Which, of course, I also explained that being a minority, despite being a minority, they want to rule over the society majority socially, economically, and politically. And that's the reason why they use religion as engine of oppression. Fine. Yeah.
Being a small group who invaded India at particular point of history, and how could they manage the whole system, a whole country, and what are the contributing, means, what are their, how could they succeed to turn the local people groups into the fold, integrate into their small group of people who came to India, and they
That
brought
has
this
been,
Varna
yeah,
system.
yeah. This question, in fact, now, like in this point which you are raising, it requires a minimum of 3 hours to explain the social history of India, which I do in many of my, in fact, now, like in the sense, social movement classes. We trace back the social history of India. I would like request you to attend one of such things. One, otherwise, I can refer you some, give you some references. Books like, in fact, now, the original inhabitants of Bharatvarsha by Gustav Oppert. Way back in 1893, he published that book, and there are many other references which you can see. I would rather ask you to read Rabindranath Thapar. They have explained you, in fact, now how this. I'm also giving the reference of those things. She says imagined communities and the construction of Hindu identity. That was one title. She was talking about Aryans and their social. There are many references I can give you. Okay, and the mechanisms through which a pastoral nomadic group could take over, win over, actually, a settled agricultural civilization. That mechanism itself is very, very important. To explain those mechanisms, yes, I think so. It requires time. I can do it later, actually, not as now. I cannot manage, in fact, no, to answer your question.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. That is very interesting. If you can do one session on that, that will be great input, because
that is beyond the purview of this particular lecture series.
yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So for the point of nation building, annihilation of caste system is a must. That's what the assertion of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
You are reiterating what I already talked about.
Okay.
He says in the affirmative, yes.
So change of mindset and change of
I would request you, Dr. P.D.Satyapal, to probably, you have recorded this particular talk.
Yes, sir. Yeah, please.
Once
Yeah,
again,
sure.
because I understand, I know pretty well these concepts, in fact, no, cannot be comprehended that easily with one just talk.
Yeah, 2-3 times.
I would request you to kindly listen to it again. Then, of course, we can get into this. Okay.
Sure, sir, sure.
Yeah.
Dear friends, before I close, is there any other question, or should we close? Okay.
Excuse me, sir. So I have a question, a query. Sir, you mentioned the BKV, it's Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya caste. What about the Shudra community in India in the present in Indian system, Indian caste system, where the Shudras stand?
Yeah.
And is there any contribution from the?
Yeah, Dr. Suresh, actually, the Brahmin Kshatriya Varna has been the Varnas, actually. And they remained as Varnas and as well as castes, actually, like in a sense. Most of it, in fact, no. See, if you say, look into Indian society, the Shudra Varna, which of course later on, in fact, no, divided into Ati Shudra Varna. So the number of castes, division among the castes, in fact, no, with this Varna is quite huge. In Shudras, we have OBCs, other backward castes, as a constitutional category. Their number is 3,748 castes, according to Mandal Commission. And if you look into Atishudra, the scheduled castes are 1,246. And the scheduled tribes, basically, they are more than 460. So put together, just the Shudra Varna, the original Shudra, undivided Shudra Varna, it has more than 5,500 castes. But if you look into the Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, all these three Varnas put together, the total number of castes among these three Varnas is less than 200, right? So the point is that they have been, like, in a sense, operating both as Varnas and as well as castes, actually. And if you look, you said about the Shudras, the Shudra identity has been given by these Aryans themselves. When they came in, they called with insulting identities: Anarya, Dasha, Dasya, Anasa, all these kind of insulting identities. And later on, they, for a reason, in fact, no, because they have been formulating their own compositions: the Vedas, Vedangas, Srutas, Smrutis, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, Upanishads. You have Itihasas, Puranas, all this kind of composition they have only bought. So there has been, in fact, no, there are oral compositions, but as you look at them, there is a kind of a change in the society, because they have been composed at different times of time, periods, actually. So at one point of time, you'll find in Upanishads, if you find, the Kshatriyas are trying to compete with the Brahmins. They say, we also would like to do the yajnas, other things. That's the Vishwamitra Vasishta Samvada we see. So therefore, as a result of revolt by some of the Kshatriyas, the fourth Varna has been formed, the Shudra Varna, actually. And who are these people? These people were the original inhabitants of India. They were the makers of Indus Valley civilization. They belong to the producing caste of this society. So they were called as Shudra. The very word Shudra is an insulting word, means a bastard, actually. So, and they have heaped lot many, like, in a sense, disabilities, impositions on the Shudra Varna. And they say their duty is to serve do different services to the BKV, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. They say it's their duty. But today, as you asked me, today the Constitution of India makes up three different categories. Those categories which I talk about, the schedule of castes has a schedule, is a list, actually, list of castes who suffered untouchability, unseeability, unapproachability. They were ex-untouchables, ex-unseeables, and all. And schedule of tribes is, in fact, now who suffered isolation. And there is a third large group of Shudras, actually. They are called as other backward classes. Other means they are also backward, but they are other than the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So these three constitutional groups, they form the bulk of Shudra society. Apart from this, there are few politically and economically advanced communities among the Shudras. Originally, in the Varna scale, they were Shudras. Today, they have become economically and politically dominant, and they are called as, in fact, no, they are called as upper Shudras. Just like the peasant communities, in fact, no, the landed communities in different parts of this thing and all. Just like if you see into Andhra, we have Kammas and Reddys, Velamas and all. They were Shudras. And if you look into Tamil Nadu, you will see the Tevars, the, like, in a sense, the Vellalars, you will see the Vanniyars, the Gaundars, the, like, in a sense, yeah, all these communities who were Shudras before. Probably you also have, in fact, now in Kerala, some Shudra communities who are actually originally Shudras. Even the Idavas, like, in a sense, today they are politically and economically relatively well off. But Idavas, as probably you must be knowing, they are now in the OBC category, but while they were considered as untouchables for some time. So therefore, even Nayars, actually, I know, like, probably, of course, you are better informed than me. So these people, like, if you go to Maharashtra, the Marathas, they were originally the Shudras. Now today, like the Patels of Gujarat, like the Patnaiks of say Orissa. Like in fact, I can give each and every state there are people who were under the Shudra category, but today they have become politically and economically dominant. So they are called as upper Shudra communities. But a majority of the OBCs, in fact, no, those who are the communities which are attached to traditional occupation, and most of them definitely, in fact, no, are backward. That's the reason why Dr. Ambedkar has made a social engineering. He has made a social engineering in the Constitution of India. He created a new class called as backward class, which you don't find anywhere in any constitution in the world. We know pretty well about the Marxian class, the rich, poor, and all. But Ambedkar has created backward class in the Constitution of India. Okay, and he said that we need to understand the distinction between poverty and backwardness to better understand Indian society. See, we know pretty well poverty is purely economic criteria, based on the economic criteria, and poverty is temporary. But backwardness, which Ambedkar talks about, is because of the caste system, a systemic. It's the backwardness is systemic. It creates lots of disabilities actually. So backwardness basically is because of the social system, systemic, and creates lots of disabilities. And in India, he says that the constitution says that the socially and educationally backward classes, they form the majority, and the majority are traditionally oppressed by the caste system. So India has a very peculiarity. The majority are oppressed. The majority, in fact, now are dominated by the minority in this country. So therefore, Ambedkar has created representations to the majority people of this country, who are called as backward class, who are again, in fact, now further divided into categories called as OBC, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes. So that has been the position of these groups actually. These three, like in a sense, are the original inhabitants. They don't belong to the like Brahminical groups, Aryan groups actually, who came from outside. Yeah. Hope I'm clear, Dr. Suresh.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's very informative. Thank you so much, Professor Satyapal, for your valuable lecture on this annihilation of caste by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Yeah, dear friends, looking forward to see you in the next session. So yeah, every alternative Wednesday we have at 6:30 p.m. We are having this virtual training session. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the last in the series. The last in the series is upcoming actually.
Yes.
So that is the 14th, and we complete this course with that particular thing. Yeah, that is basically, of course, the topic is Ambedkar, in fact, now and his efforts for development of and progress of this country. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you,
sir.
and see you again. Bye, bye, bye.
Yeah, bye, bye. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.